The Laughing Council. The Galactic Council chamber was a place of shining marble floors and tall glass arches, where hundreds of species came together to discuss matters of war and peace. It was here that humanity's first warship was revealed to the wider galaxy, and it was here that laughter erupted when the colossal vessel was shown on the great screen. The ship was named Atlas, a massive block of steel and titanium, crawling forward in the display at a pace so slow that some delegates openly yawned. The announcers described it as a vessel of resilience, of endurance, but the other races only heard excuses. They whispered to one another that humans had built a floating coffin, a ship doomed before its engines even warmed. The Raxan ambassador, a tall insectoid with glittering mandibles, clicked loudly in amusement. He declared to the council that the humans must have mistaken cargo haulers for battleships. The hall echoed with cheers and cruel chuckles. The Sarathi, a serpentine race famous for their swift raiders, coiled around their seats in mockery and hissed that even their old training vessels could outpace the Atlas. The council had gathered to judge whether Earth's entry into the defense fleet was worthy, and at that moment most saw only comedy. Humanity's dream of standing equal among galactic powers looked like it had collapsed into farce, yet the human delegation did not shout back. They sat in silence at their bench, listening, watching, their faces unreadable. Among them was Captain Elena Ward, the chosen commander of the Atlas. She wore the dark blue uniform of Earth's fleet, and though her jaw tightened at every insult, she never moved to defend herself. She knew the council's eyes were sharp, waiting for anger, waiting for proof that humans were too emotional to command a true warship. Instead, she let the jeers continue, her silence cutting deeper than words ever could. Some few among the alien crowd noticed her stillness and wondered if the humans carried secrets they had not spoken aloud. When the laughter finally quieted, the council's chairperson, an elder from the Quran species, leaned forward and asked if humanity wished to make a final statement before judgment. Captain Ward stood tall, her voice calm, her words heavy with meaning. She said that the Atlas was not designed to impress by speed nor by beauty, but by survival. She said that it was a ship forged in the image of humanity itself, slow to rise, slow to anger, but unstoppable once set in motion. Her words stirred whispers across the chamber, but most brushed them aside as hollow pride. The vote passed quickly, granting Earth probationary membership in the fleet, though many saw it as a courtesy rather than a recognition of strength. As the session ended, the delegates left in groups, still laughing about the humans and their lumbering craft. One Sarathi officer hissed that it would take the Atlas a century to arrive at a battle. Another suggested the humans should use it as a museum ship, a place to display relics rather than weapons. The mockery spread through the networks of the galaxy, carried by holovids and messages, so that colonies far and wide began to share jokes about the foolish slow ship from Earth. Even children on distant worlds pointed at images of it and laughed, but while the galaxy laughed, the crew of the Atlas prepared in silence. They walked the long steel corridors, feeling the thrum of hidden engines beneath their boots. They checked weapons sealed behind armored hatches, systems that the council had not seen, systems that no outsider truly understood. Captain Ward moved among them steady as stone, never speaking of the insults that had been hurled but never forgetting them either. Her crew carried the weight of that day on their shoulders, and though doubt gnawed at some, they trusted her calm more than their own fears. The galaxy believed the Atlas was slow and weak, but within its armored heart something powerful waited for the moment it would be called upon. That night, as the council chamber emptied and stars turned slowly outside the windows, the record of the session was transmitted across the galaxy. The official verdict described the Atlas as functional but unimpressive, a curiosity more than a threat. Yet beneath that cold judgment, whispers began to rise in corners of the galaxy, where warriors and strategists spoke in private. They knew that sometimes the quietest enemy was the most dangerous. They knew that patience and silence could hide weapons sharper than any blade. And though most still mocked, a few began to wonder if perhaps humanity had not built a mistake at all, but a trap waiting to be sprung. A captain's burden, Captain Elena Ward, stood on the command deck of the Atlas as the ship drifted through the silent stretch of space beyond the inner colonies. The laughter of the council still lingered in her memory like a shadow she could not shake. Every news feed in the galaxy seemed to carry the same message that the humans had built the slowest warship ever to disgrace a fleet and that their dreams of power would be short-lived. Her crew had read the headlines and heard the jokes whispered even in the docking ports where other captains looked at them with pity or amusement. For many of them the shame was heavy, yet they remained at their stations because they believed in her more than in the opinions of strangers. The Atlas was a ship unlike any other, and Elena knew this truth better than anyone. From the outside it looked like a hulking block of steel with engines that pushed forward at the speed of drifting ice. But deep within its armored belly, the real heart of the vessel beat with quiet fury. The hull was layered with alloys tested against the most powerful plasma fire. The energy cores were designed not for rapid bursts but for long sustained campaigns, and the hidden weapon systems remained under lock, their power untold to outsiders. Humanity had built the Atlas not for show but for survival, a warship to endure storms that would break faster crafts into fragments. Elena knew this, but the rest of the galaxy saw only weakness. She often walked the corridors at night when the crew thought their captain slept. She passed engineers hunched over consoles, young pilots who stared at displays wondering if they would ever fly at the speed of alien fighters, and soldiers who polished rifles as if waiting for a war that might never come. She spoke to them, quietly, not with speeches but with steady words of reassurance. She told them that strength was not measured in how quickly you moved, but in how firmly you stood when the universe tried to push you down. Some of the younger crew nodded with half-belief while others carried doubt in their eyes, but they all returned to duty because her calm voice carried weight. No laughter could erase. Their first patrol took them into the frontier zones where pirate, raids, and Krell scouts often tested the edges of human territory. Messages from the Council had assigned the Atlas to routes that faster ships did not want, routes that seemed almost an insult, as if the humans were being given work no one else cared for. Elena accepted without complaint. To her, every journey was a chance to learn, to test, to prepare. She watched how her crew managed long shifts, how they responded to false alarms, how they worked when supplies ran thin. She saw loyalty in their eyes grow slowly like a flame sheltered from the wind. They began to trust that their strange, slow ship was more than the galaxy believed. Still, the mockery followed them. Whenever they docked at neutral stations, traders laughed and said the Atlas had arrived late again. Alien captains joked that their ships could circle the human vessel 10 times before it reached a gate. The crew bristled at the words, but Elena always held her silence. She reminded her people that predators often laugh at prey until the moment the teeth close. She told them that patience was their weapon, and that one day the galaxy would see the truth. Her calm did not erase the sting of humiliation, but it gave the crew a sense of purpose. They were carrying a burden heavier than any hull, the burden of being underestimated, and they swore to her that they would not break. One evening, as the Atlas passed near the Iridian Rift, a communications officer brought her a report of Krell movement. Scouts had been sighted massing near a frontier colony, and faster ships were too far to respond. The Council had dismissed it as a minor threat, assuming the humans would retreat rather than intervene. Elena stood in silence as she read the data. Her officers watched her, waiting for orders, knowing that to approach would invite danger they were not expected to face. But in her mind, the Council's laughter still echoed, and she knew that retreat would only prove them right. She gave the command to alter course toward the colony. The crew stiffened with surprise, but no one refused. They had carried the weight of mockery long enough, and now they would carry it into battle. As the engines turned and the Atlas moved with its steady, heavy pace toward the colony, a strange calm settled over the crew. They were afraid, yet beneath, the fear was a fire that had smoldered since the day the galaxy mocked them. Captain Ward felt it too, a steady burning in her chest. She knew that her ship was slow, but she also knew that it was strong, and that soon the galaxy would learn what patience and silence could hide. The trap set. The Atlas pushed through the void with the same steady pace that had earned it endless ridicule. Yet this time, its course was set toward danger rather than away from it. The colony of Vera Prime was little more than a frontier world with scattered cities and fragile defenses. A place of farmers and miners who trusted the Galactic Council to protect them. But the Council had underestimated the Krell who moved in swift hunting packs across the borderlands. Reports showed that half a dozen enemy cruisers were closing in on the colony, and while faster Allied ships retreated to regroup, the Atlas continued on alone. To outside eyes, it looked like suicide, a foolish gesture from a slow ship that could never keep up with a radon. The command deck, Captain Elena Ward stood at the center as her crew whispered among themselves. Some feared they would be torn apart. Before reaching the colony, others doubted that their weapons could match the speed of Krell vessels, but Elena's voice cut through their uncertainty with calm authority. She ordered silence and told them that no colony would be left to burn while the Atlas still drew power. Her words filled the deck with a quiet resolve, for though doubt remained in their hearts, they trusted her conviction more than their own fear. The navigation officer reported the estimated time to intercept, and as usual, the number was painfully long, but Elena only nodded and instructed her crew to prepare battle stations. The Krell were already broadcasting threats across open channels. Their guttural voices promised fire and chains for the humans who dared approach, mocking the slow ship as a feast waiting to be consumed. Across the colony's skies, citizens watched terrified as the enemy fleet descended, their sleek vessels slicing through the atmosphere while defense towers fired weak beams that barely scratched their shields. Families huddled in shelters as the first bombardments began, believing no help could arrive in time. Then, far out in the black, the Atlas emerged from jump space, moving with its ponderous weight, a single warship against a predator. Pack alien commanders sneered as they saw the lumbering vessel. They hailed it on open comms, taunting the humans, asking if they had come to offer themselves as hostages. But Elena did not respond with anger. Instead, she ordered her crew to hold formation and advance at the same steady pace. On the tactical screens, the Krell ships darted in tight circles, probing, mocking, and preparing to strike from all sides. To them, the Atlas was nothing more than a target waiting to be torn apart. Yet what they did not know was that Elena had studied their hunting patterns for months. She had seen how they rushed prey, how they grew reckless when victory seemed certain, and she had shaped her plan around their arrogance. As the enemy drew closer, the Atlas appeared to stumble in its course, drifting into a position that seemed poorly chosen. Officers on the bridge of Krell cruisers laughed at the clumsy maneuver and closed in, eager to finish the hunt quickly before reinforcements could arrive. Colony broadcasts caught the moment and transmitted across space, showing the slow ship drifting into what looked like a trap of its own making. Viewers on distant worlds shook their heads in pity, expecting to witness the destruction of Earth's first warship live. Even some of the Atlas crew swallowed their fear, wondering if their captain had misjudged the approach. But Elena stood unshaken, her eyes locked on the tactical map as if she could see threads of fate weaving around them. When the Krell moved into strike range, she gave her first unexpected order. She commanded the Atlas to halt completely. Engines throttled down until the ship drifted like a dead rock. The sudden stop confused the enemy, who expected the humans to flee or dodge. The Krell spread wide, surrounding the Atlas with hungry precision, certain now that they had their prey cornered. But this was exactly what Elena desired. She knew the Atlas was never meant to run. It was meant to endure and to strike when the enemy was too close to escape. As her crew looked to her for clarity, she reminded them in a calm voice that patience was their shield, and silence their weapon. And now the moment had come to reveal their strength. The tactical officer watched the screens as the Krell ships swarmed, around them like wolves around a wounded beast. They prepared their weapons, energy levels climbing, but before the first volleys could land, Elena gave the signal. In an instant, the armored plates along the Atlas began to shift, sliding back to reveal hidden cannon ports that had never been displayed to the Council. Massive plasma turrets emerged from beneath the dull armor, shockwave launchers came online, and energy readings spiked to levels that stunned even her own officers. The slow ship was not weak, it was a fortress, and the trap was now set. The Krell did not yet realize the danger, but the humans on board felt it, a tension like the stillness before a storm. and they waited for the order that would change the course of the battle and perhaps the fate of humanity itself, the hidden power. Krell fleet circled the Atlas with hungry confidence as if the battle had already been won before the first shot was fired. Their commanders barked orders in guttural tones, and their sleek cruisers darted into position like predators closing in on a helpless beast. To outside observers, the human ship looked vulnerable, a slow relic drifting in the void. But to those aboard the Atlas, the silence before the storm was heavy with anticipation. Captain Elena Ward stood firm at the center of the command deck, her eyes fixed on the glowing tactical displays that showed red markers surrounding them from every side. Her crew felt the weight of the moment pressing against their chests, yet they clung to her calm presence as if it were a shield stronger than steel. When the Krell unleashed their opening barrage, the void lit with streaks of plasma fire that hammered against the hull of the Atlas. The ship shuddered beneath the assault, alarms wailed across the decks, and for a heartbeat fear raced through the crew that the laughter of the galaxy would be proven right. But then the shields flared bright and held. The layered armor absorbed the punishment, and the Atlas continued to drift forward like an immovable mountain. Elena did not flinch. She waited as more blasts rained down, letting the enemy grow bolder, letting them believe their prey was crumbling. The Krell pressed closer, circling tighter, until they were within the range she had been waiting for. With a single sharp command, she ordered the weapon systems to full activation. Across the hull, hidden panels clanked open, and massive cannons rose into the cold light of distant stars. Plasma turrets the size of towers extended from armored slots. Missile pods hummed to life, and the ship's energy core surged with power that had been concealed during every public inspection. The slow ship was not defenseless at all. It was a fortress bristling with firepower, built to withstand punishment until enemies trapped themselves within its jaws. The crew gasped at the sheer scale of the hidden arsenal, even though they had trained for months without ever seeing it unleashed in full. Now they understood why their captain had spoken of patience and why the council had never been told the truth. The first volley from the Atlas tore through the void with thunderous might. Twin plasma beams lanced outward, slicing across the flanks of a Krell cruiser, burning through its shields and cutting deep into its hull until it erupted in flames. Shockwave warheads followed, detonating with crushing force that scattered smaller escort ships like leaves in a storm. The Krell reeled in disbelief, their hunters suddenly finding themselves hunted. They had thought the humans weak and foolish, but the battlefield was shifting in a single heartbeat. Colonists, watching from Vera Prime, stared at the skies as distant flashes revealed the impossible. The slow ship was fighting back with a ferocity unmatched by anything they had seen before. The enemy tried to regroup, their ships weaving frantically, but the Atlas was not chasing them with speed. It held its ground, turning slowly yet deliberately, its weapons firing in measured rhythm that punished every Krell ship that strayed too near. Each blast was heavy, each strike devastating, and the enemy found that their quick maneuvers only brought them back into the line of fire. The Atlas could not outrun them, but it did not need to. Its strength lay in the storm it could endure and the crushing blows it could deliver when enemies came close. In that moment, the mocking laughter of the council seemed like a distant echo, drowned by the roar of battle. On the bridge of the Atlas, the crew transformed. Where once there had been doubt and shame, now there was fierce pride. Gunners cheered as their shots struck true. Engineers shouted reports of systems holding steady, and the navigation officer called out enemy losses with growing confidence. The weight they had carried since the day of humiliation was lifting, with every enemy ship that burst into flame. Yet through it all, Elena remained calm, her voice steady, her commands precise. She knew the battle was not yet won, and she knew the Krell would not retreat easily. But she also knew that the hidden power of the Atlas had been revealed, and that nothing would ever be the same again. As another enemy cruiser fell burning toward the rift, silence rippled through the alien comms. The Krell had never expected resistance from the humans, much less this brutal retaliation. Fear began to creep into their voices, and hesitation slowed their attacks. They had come to mock and destroy, yet now they found themselves bleeding, under the guns of a ship they had laughed at only days before. Elena watched the hesitation grow, and she knew that the trap was working. The Atlas had turned humiliation into a weapon, and had shown the galaxy that what was mocked as weakness could be transformed into unmatched strength, humanity's wrath. The battle over Vera Prime raged with fire and thunder as the Krell attempted to regroup against the storm they had unleashed. Their commanders barked frantic orders, demanding tighter formations, demanding renewed aggression. But the fear that had begun to creep into their ranks could not be silenced. The Atlas hung in the void like a mountain of steel, slow and immovable, its hull scarred from the first barrage, yet its heart beating stronger with every volley. Captain Elena Ward stood firm at the center of the bridge, her voice calm as she gave orders, her eyes burning with a quiet fire that her crew mirrored in their own faces. For the first time since the Council's laughter, they no longer felt shame. They felt pride, they felt rage, and they felt the unstoppable will of humanity rising from their chests. The next wave of Krell ships closed in with desperate speed, trying to overwhelm the Atlas with sheer numbers. Their plasma bolts rained down in blinding streaks, painting the sky above the colony with light. But the Atlas absorbed the fire like a stone wall enduring a storm. Then its guns roared again. Plasma beams lanced out, shockwave warheads detonated, and missile bays spat streams of guided death. A Krell destroyer split apart under the barrage, its wreckage spiraling toward the planet's atmosphere in a trail of fire that lit the night for the colonists below. Cheers erupted from those who watched in shelters, their fear slowly giving way to disbelief and awe. The humans had not fled, they had not cowered. They had fought back against the most feared raiders in the sector, and they were winning. On the bridge, the gunners shouted with fierce joy as each target fell. One by one, the Krell ships that had once mocked them burst apart, their arrogance burned away by the fury of the Atlas. Engineers reported damage, but their voices carried pride rather than panic. They patched wounds with haste, knowing that every second bought by their repairs kept the guns firing and the crew alive. The navigation officer tracked the enemy with steady hands, calling out maneuvers with precision that turned the slow-turning bulk of the ship into a weapon of inevitability. The Atlas did not need to race or chase. It needed only to stand and strike, and every strike was like a hammer blow on the enemy's spirit. The Krell tried flanking maneuvers, darting in at angles, but Elena anticipated them as if she could see their thoughts before they moved. She ordered fire not where they were, but where they would be, and the Atlas answered with merciless accuracy. Another enemy cruiser caught the full fury of 3 plasma cannons at once, its shields collapsing. Before it exploded in a brilliant flare, the crew roared in triumph, the sound echoing through the corridors of the massive vessel, a sound that drowned out months of humiliation. They were no longer the laughingstock of the galaxy. They were warriors carrying the wrath of their species into the stars outside the colony. The battle became a broadcast that spread across networks faster than light. Every world tuned in to see the spectacle, expecting to witness the fall of humanity's first warship. And instead, they saw Krell ships dying in fire around the very vessel they had mocked. Alien audiences who had once laughed now sat in silence, their eyes wide as the slow ship held its ground against a fleet that should have torn it apart. Military strategists whispered in urgent tones, realizing that the humans had hidden weapons the Council never knew existed. Fear began to ripple across empires that had dismissed Earth as weak and unworthy. If one ship could do this, what else? Were the humans hiding? Elena gave no speeches during the fight. She did not shout in triumph. She did not gloat at the enemy's retreat. She simply gave her orders with steady conviction, guiding her crew like a conductor leading an orchestra of fire. Yet within her heart she felt the weight of every soul on Vera Prime who prayed for deliverance, and every crew member who had carried the burden of ridicule. The wrath of humanity was not born from pride, but from survival. They had been underestimated, mocked and pushed aside, but now their fury was a storm no enemy could stand against. As the last Krell ship broke formation and fled into the black, the Atlas stood battered but unbowed, its weapons still glowing hot, its crew exhausted, yet unbroken. Silence fell across the bridge as the enemy vanished from their screens, and for a moment no one moved. Then a cheer rose, not of arrogance but of relief and pride, a cheer that carried through the ship like thunder. Humanity's wrath had been unleashed, and it had carved its mark into the stars. The slow warship was no longer a joke. It was a warning, and the galaxy would never laugh again. fear in the stars. The news of the battle at Vera Prime spread faster than the wreckage of the Krell cruisers drifting through space. Across the networks of the galaxy, images of the Atlas standing, unbroken, filled every screen, and the silence that followed was more powerful than any cheer. Worlds that had mocked the humans now whispered in unease. Military councils studied every broadcast frame by frame, searching for weaknesses and finding none they could trust. Traders who once joked about the slow ship now spoke its name in hushed voices as if it carried a weight too heavy to dismiss. The laughter that had followed humanity for months was gone, replaced by a silence filled with fear. In the great chamber of the Galactic Council, the mood was different from the day when the Atlas was first revealed. Then, the air had been filled with mocking voices, but now it was filled with unease. Delegates shuffled nervously in their seats, remembering how they had laughed openly at the humans, and now wondering what the humans must be thinking as they sat quietly in their places. The chairperson of the council demanded reports, asking how a ship so slow had survived a full Krell assault, asking how hidden weapons of such magnitude had been overlooked. No answers satisfied, for the truth was simple and troubling. Humanity had built something the galaxy did not understand, and that truth alone was enough to plant seeds of dread. Captain Elena Ward did not attend the meeting. She remained with her crew aboard the Atlas, overseeing the repairs that were underway. The ship had endured terrible punishment, its armor scarred and its shields drained, but it still stood proud in orbit above Vera Prime. Colonists on the surface sent endless messages of thanks, calling her the shield of their world, calling her crew saviors. Yet Elena did not let the praise cloud her judgment. She knew that victory brought new dangers, for fear was a sharper weapon than laughter. The galaxy would not ignore Earth again, but what they chose to do next was uncertain. Allies who had once dismissed humanity might now seek partnership. Yet enemies might plot vengeance before humans could grow stronger. The Krell themselves were shaken. Their defeat was broadcast across their own networks, and warriors who prided themselves on speed and dominance now carried shame like chains. Some among their leaders demanded immediate retaliation to erase the stain. Others counseled caution, warning that if one human ship could break them, what would happen when a fleet of such ships appeared? The Krell were predators, but predators could become prey when fear clouded their hunger. For the first time in generations they hesitated, unsure of how to face a species they had believed weak and laughable only days before. Within the corridors of the Atlas, the crew walked with new pride. The burden of ridicule that had weighed on them since the unveiling was gone, replaced by a fierce sense of belonging. Engineers wore their burns and bruises like medals. Gunners spoke of their kills with voices steady and proud, and young officers, who once doubted, now looked to their captain with unwavering faith. Yet alongside their pride ran a deeper current, a realization that they had not only defended a colony, but had altered the balance of the galaxy itself. They had revealed humanity to the stars not as a people to be pitied, but as a force to be feared. Broadcasts carried rumors from system to system. Some claimed the Atlas carried weapons stolen from ancient empires. Others whispered that Earth had tapped forbidden sciences. None of the rumors were true, but truth mattered little. Fear grew because mystery remained. The slow ship had shown itself to be unstoppable, and in the shadows of that mystery, empires began to redraw their strategies. Fleets were recalled, treaties reconsidered, and spies were dispatched to learn more about the humans who had hidden their strength so well. Humanity had entered the galactic stage not as a child seeking approval, but as a predator, revealing its fangs. Alina stood in her private quarters one evening, gazing out at the stars. She thought of the council, of their silence, of the Krell licking their wounds, and of the fear spreading through empires that had once scoffed at Earth. She knew that fear could protect, but it could also provoke. She understood that her ship was no longer only a guardian. It was a symbol, and symbols carried burdens as heavy as worlds. She whispered to herself that the galaxy would learn the truth soon enough. Humanity was not fast, but it was patient, and patience was more terrifying than speed, and so fear spread across the stars like a tide that could not be turned back. Fear of the slow ship that struck like thunder, Fear of a people who had endured ridicule and returned it with fire. Fear of humanity, no longer the newcomers to be mocked, but the storm waiting on the horizon. The final strike. The Krell did not remain silent for long. Their pride had been torn apart by the defeat at Vera Prime, and their warriors howled for revenge. For predators such as them, fear could wound, but humiliation demanded blood. Weeks after their retreat, their fleets gathered again, larger and more ruthless, a force that dwarfed what the Atlas had faced before. Scouts reported their movements across the frontier, and soon the Galactic Council received word that the Krell intended a full strike to erase humanity before it could rise further. Many delegates whispered that the humans would not survive a second assault, but in their hearts they feared what might happen if the Krell failed again. Fear twisted into desperate calculation, for no empire wanted to be the next to face the slow warship's fury. On board the Atlas, Captain Elena Ward listened to the reports with unshaken calm. Her ship was still scarred from the last battle, its armor patched and its systems strained, yet it remained ready. The crew no longer carried doubt. They carried a fire that no mockery could extinguish. They knew the enemy was coming in force, and they knew survival was uncertain, but they were prepared to stand with their captain until the very end. Elena walked the bridge and the corridors, meeting every gaze, offering steady words, reminding them that humanity had always endured, not by speed, not by strength alone, but by refusing to break when the storm raged. Her words did not promise safety. They promised meaning, and that was enough. When the Krell fleet emerged from the rift, the stars seemed to vanish beneath their numbers. Dozens of cruisers, carriers, and destroyers filled the void, their weapons glowing with menace. They advanced toward the Atlas with the hunger of a predator determined to erase its shame. Alien observers across the galaxy watched through hidden channels, expecting the final fall of the humans, and yet they also trembled, for none could be sure of what secrets the Atlas still held. On the colony worlds of Earth, people held their breath as they saw the storm gather, knowing that their fate might be decided in the next hours. The first exchange came swiftly. Krell fire poured down like rain, hammering the Atlas from every side. Shields screamed, armor plates buckled, and corridors shook with violent tremors. Crew members were thrown from their stations, but they rose again, bloodied yet unyielding. The Atlas fired back, its cannons blazing, its shockwave warheads detonating with thunder, and enemy ships fell in burning shards. But for every Krell, cruiser destroyed, two more closed in. The weight of numbers pressed harder, and even the might of the Atlas could not withstand forever. Elena watched the tactical displays as the lines closed around her ship, and she knew the moment had come for the final weapon. Deep within the Atlas rested a device never revealed to the Council, a gravity core bomb forged in secret by human engineers who had studied the forces that bound stars. It was not meant for show. It was meant for survival, a last strike to end a battle when no other path remained. Elena gave the order, her voice steady, though her crew felt the gravity of the command. The engineers unlocked the safeties, the power core roared, and the weapon was primed. On the enemy channels, the Krell laughed again, believing victory was only moments away, unaware that the humans had lured them close once more. The Atlas slowed its engines until it appeared crippled, drifting amid fire and smoke. The Krell drew in with triumph, their ships closing tightly around the wounded prey. They prepared to fire the final barrage that would end the human warship's tail. But Elena's eyes burned with iron resolve as she gave the last order. The gravity core bomb was released into the heart of the enemy formation. For a moment the void was silent. Then the bomb erupted, unleashing a wave that bent space itself. Krell's ships were torn from their positions, their hulls twisted and crushed. Their flag carrier split apart like glass under a hammer. The explosion lit the void with a brilliance so fierce that even distant worlds saw its echo. When the light faded, the Krell fleet was gone. Wreckage drifted in every direction, glowing embers against the black. The Atlas itself floated wounded, but alive, its crew exhausted, their bodies aching, their spirits blazing. Silence filled the bridge until one voice whispered that the Krell had been broken. Then another spoke, then another, until a cheer erupted that shook the very walls. Humanity had faced annihilation and had answered with fire so great that the stars themselves bore witness. Across the galaxy, fear deepened, but alongside fear came respect. No one could laugh now. No one could mock. The slow human warship had struck, and its strike had shattered an empire. Elena stood at her station, her uniform torn, her face marked with ash, and she allowed herself the faintest smile. The Atlas had survived again. Not as a relic, not as a mistake, but as a legend. She whispered quietly to herself that humanity had only just begun. And in that moment, the galaxy understood that the humans were not slow. They were patient. They were enduring. And when they struck to kill. The void trembled as the Krell armada appeared like a swarm of predators determined to erase their shame. Their numbers were vast, carriers and destroyers filling the darkness, their engines burning like hungry suns. The Atlas stood alone against them, scarred from the last battle but unbroken, its crew steady and silent as they faced what seemed the end. The galaxy watched from every corner, waiting for the slow human warship to finally be crushed beneath the weight of a true fleet. Some hoped, some feared, but none could predict what was about to unfold. On the bridge, Captain Elena Ward gave her orders with calm precision. Shields strained as enemy fire rained upon them. Corridors shook, alarms screamed, but the Atlas endured. Crew members bled yet held their posts, their hands steady, their eyes bright with unyielding fire. Each cannon that roared brought down another enemy vessel. Each missile trail marked another predator destroyed. Yet the tide pressed harder, the numbers swarmed closer, and even the strongest steel could not stand forever. Elena knew that the moment had come when patience must give way to final fury. Hidden within the Atlas was a weapon born in secret, a gravity core designed not for intimidation, but for survival. It was the last gift of Earth's engineers, a weapon no council had ever been told of, a weapon meant for the one strike that could change the fate of a people. Elena gave the command, and deep within the ship locks disengaged. Power roared, and the device came alive with a hum that vibrated through every deck. The crew felt the weight of destiny pressing upon them, but none faltered. They had been mocked, they had been underestimated, and now they would answer. The Atlas slowed until it drifted like a dying beast. The Krell commanders, blinded by arrogance, closed in tightly, eager to finish their prey. They laughed across the channels, promising chains and fire, but Elena stood unflinching, her voice steady as she spoke the final order. The gravity core bomb was released, drifting silently into the heart of the enemy formation. For one breath, the universe seemed to hold still. Then the detonation came. Space itself bent and screamed as the bomb erupted. The force crushed metal, twisted ships into shards, tore carriers apart as if they were paper. A wave of destruction surged outward, engulfing the Krell fleet in a single unstoppable strike. Flames and wreckage filled the void, the light brighter than any sun. And when it faded, nothing remained of the armada but silence and drifting ruins. The predators were gone, their pride shattered, their power broken in one heartbeat. The Atlas floated battered but alive, its hull scorched, its crew exhausted, their hearts blazing with pride. On the bridge, no one spoke at first. The silence, heavy until slowly cheers began to rise, not of arrogance but of triumph earned through fire and endurance. Across the galaxy the broadcasts spread, and for the first time the stars carried not laughter but awe. Humanity had revealed its true nature, not quick, not fragile, but patient, unyielding and terrifying when provoked. Elena stood among her crew, her face marked with smoke and fatigue, yet her eyes fierce with resolve. She whispered that the galaxy would remember this day, that humanity was no longer a shadow at the council's edge but a storm standing in the center of the stars. The Atlas had struck, and its strike had changed everything. The end.